Hello, and thank you for joining me. This is another weekly update on my 5 vermicomposting systems, starting with one of my regular totes. I say it all the time, but I do just like to repeat it for anyone new. My regular totes do not have any holes at the bottom. They are not double bin for drainage. It's just a regular bin that I allow to vent from the top. I don't put the regular tote bin lids on the top of them. I have decided to use mosquito netting on the top of them, as that does allow for more moisture to evaporate from the bin, even though I find that my regular totes hold a lot of moisture. So what I'm doing at this point is just feeling around in the bin, checking to see if there are any large clumps of food particles left anywhere in the bin. This is looking really good though. There's not a lot of particles of anything left. Even the cardboard is broken down and the castings are starting to feel really good. They're nice and heavy, not that waterlogged heavy where they're muddy, but that heaviness that the castings get as they get to their final stage. So with this bin, I don't want to give it too much more food. What I want to do is introduce just a little bit more material to it to make sure that once it gets to the final stage, I have enough material in the bin. So I'm going to introduce some more shredded cardboard to this and add some water to the cardboard to add moisture so that the cardboard isn't dried out. This may or may not be a good decision on my part to put the cardboard all on one side of the bin, but I don't want to mix it in just yet. Since the castings are at a good consistency themselves, I want to just add the water to the cardboard. So we'll see what happens, but I believe in about 3 to 4 weeks time, these shredded cardboard that I'm adding to it will have broken down enough. If there's still larger pieces, it's something that I can sift out, but the way that the castings feel right now, I think I'm about 3 to 4 weeks out from where I want to harvest. So I'm going to put the cardboard in, put the food over where the cardboard side is, and then do the regular grit and the bubble wrap, and then this bin is set up for the next week. Moving over to the second regular tote that I have. The second regular tote tends to hold a lot more moisture than the first tote that I showed you. So in this one, I'm noticing that the material, as usual, is a bit wetter than the other one. But despite the fact that the material in here is damper, it is also feeling like how the castings start to feel when it's ready to harvest. Now the material in this one isn't as broken down as much as the material in the other bin, but I am still going to add additional cardboard just to one side, and I'm going to do the exact same thing for this bin that I'm doing in the other bin, just to see if there's any difference in how the bins react to it, rather than doing two different things to the bin. So I'm just mixing in whatever material is left in this bin and always using a very gentle hand, trying not to disturb the worms or hurt the worms too much. But I don't want the castings to get stuck in the bottom and then food and any particles to get stuck in the bottom, and just clearing an area for where I'm gonna put the cardboard. So really I'm gonna follow the same process and wet the castings, which as I'm doing this, I'm questioning because I am adding watermelon, which holds a lot of water content. So I'm just thinking ahead to the next week and how this is going to affect the bin. But I am going to give this a regular to larger size feeding for the worms. When they get to this stage, either I feed them a smaller portion or I'll feed them a larger portion and then skip a week, as I do want them to go and look for the shredded cardboard and break that down versus giving them larger regular feedings. But with this bin, once I've given it the feeding and wet down the cardboard sufficiently, I'm just gonna close it up with the bubble wrap and the mosquito screen, and then this bin as well is set up for the next week. Moving over to the first of my Vermi bag totes. This tote is on the same schedule as the other two regular totes in terms of when I would want to harvest it. It was initially harvested probably 2 to 3 weeks after the regular totes, but in an effort to just streamline my whole process, I'm going to try to keep these on the same schedules and harvest them around the same time. So with this Vermibag tote, I am noticing that it is holding a lot more moisture than it normally does, which could be attributed to our high humidity that we have been having, or it could be attributed to just the amount of watermelon that I've been putting into these bins. I'm not too sure, but just like with the regular totes, I do want to add just a little bit more material to it. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did to the other two bins and add the cardboard right as one lump right in the middle, and then give it some water, wetting it down. The only food I have at this point is watermelon, so if anything goes wrong, I'm going to blame it on the fact that I added water and watermelon to this bin when I did this particular feeding. But it is going to get the cardboard on top and the cardboard on the bottom, and then I'm going to close up this bin for the next week. All of the bins that I'm considering taking to harvest in the next 3 to 4 weeks have a totally different feel. So the castings themselves, if you're new to vermicomposting, when you first start, the bedding is very light and it doesn't have any weight to it at all. And as it goes through the process where you're adding the food and allowing the worms to break it down, it starts to become very heavy. And this bin also has that same heaviness to it where you know it's almost ready. So depending on how quickly the worms break down, this last cardboard that I've put in there will determine. But like I said, I think it's going to be about 3 to 4 weeks before I go ahead and harvest all of these. And I think I'm going to do the horizontal migration on all of the bins. But otherwise, the bins are looking great. Here's a little worm that's on there. And I am very happy with the bins and how they're coming along, and can't wait to begin the harvest on them. Now over here with the second Vermibag tote. This is the Vermibag tote where my focus is on trying to multiply the number of worms in this bin, since I lost so many and I do not know the reason why I lost them. But I do have the cardboard over to one side, and I'm trying not to disrupt the cardboard on this side too much. I'm just checking the wetness of the cardboard because I don't want it to dry out, because I want the worms to use it as a play area. But on the other side is where I've been reserving the castings to add the food to. So I kind of expect that the castings on the left side of the screen will be a lot wetter than usual. And I still have a good number of worms on the left side, and that is to be expected since I am just feeding that side. But I also do want them to go into the shredded cardboard area. So I am going to add a little bit more material to this side, just mixing it in just to make sure that it absorbs some of that moisture since it is wetter on that side. And then I'm going to put my regular smaller feeding. I want to gradually increase the amount of food I put to that side, because I read somewhere that you can also help your worms out by adding more food, but I'm not quite sure how much more to add. So I'm still going to be quite conservative with the size of the feeding that I'm giving this side of the bin and keep it still small. I'll increase it once I mix the two sides together, which will probably be in another 2 weeks. I want to give it a full 4 weeks before I mix the sides in. The good news is that it doesn't show up on camera, but when I move the bubble wrap, I am seeing some cocoons on the bubble wrap itself. So that is encouraging to see. It lets me know the worms are multiplying inside of the bin. I just hope that they do it at a good rate and that it doesn't stay as a small colony for too long. But once this is fed up, this bin is taken care of for the week with its grit, and I'm just going to put some water on this side. So I will not be upset if this bin is wetter, because I am adding quite a bit of moisture between on the cardboard, on the newspaper, and just adding moisture because the watermelon is what I'm feeding it. So if this one is wetter, it's to be expected. I'll just try to combat the moisture content as best I can, but this bin is all set up for the next week as well. And lastly is my Vermi Bag Mini, the one and only flow through system that I have in all of my vermicomposting bins. And I do enjoy having the Vermi Bag Mini because it holds a lot of material in it. Just showing you some of the healthy worms that are in the bin. They are doing really well in this system. I really don't have many complaints except for the fact that the edges on the Vermibag Mini are a bit crispy for my setting, and that it is kind of hard on the knees to harvest this bag. So I tried to harvest it as little as possible. But the level of material has dropped significantly in the mini. So I am also putting shredded cardboard in this one as well. I am going to do a sandwich layer or a lasagna layer for the Vermi Bag Mini as well. So I'm going to put a layer down of cardboard, then put some food. And it looks like a lot of food, but it really is only about 3 cucumbers. They were long cucumbers that I broke into pieces. So there's 3 cucumbers that I'm giving the worms, which they do enjoy foods that do have a lot of moisture. So it's a balance as always. A little bit of eggplant. And then once I arrange the food to try to make it so that the moisture stays to the sides and not just in the middle, I am going to put the grit on and then cover this up with another layer of cardboard and then wet it down. The amount of beetles that I have seen has greatly reduced since I took the duct tape to the edges and to the lid of this bin. So I think I've gotten on the other side of combating the beetles that were starting to explode in population in the bin. So that also makes me happy, because looking at your bin crawling, and it's not because there's a bunch of worms, it's because it's a bunch of bugs, kind of creeps me out. But this bin as well is looking good, and I will be harvesting it with the other bins. But thank you so much for sticking with me to the end. That's the update for this week. And as always, thank you so much for watching.